Welcome, algebra students, to our new chapter on data organization and analysis. Today's lesson, 13.1, is organizing data in frequency tables, and it covers pages 144 to 151. Just a heads up, there is a lot of note-taking and vocabulary today, so you may need to pause this as we go along. First of all, some vocabulary. Raw data is simply data collected in surveys that has not been organized. A frequency table is a visual that is a means of organizing the raw data that has been collected. Now, the steps in organizing data in a frequency table is to first set up the table with 3 columns. In the first column, you would have the class, which means the title of whatever you're collecting. Then the next column would be the tally marks, where you keep track of how many of each you have. And then column 3 would be totaling the tally marks, and that would be how you would gain the frequency of that something occurs. So the total of the tally marks for each class is actually going to be the frequency. So that would be the first thing. Then the second step is you would read the data one by one and mark a stroke, a tally as you go through things. So those are the columns. And then you actually go through the raw data, and then you give each different one that you have a stroke, a tally mark in the proper column. And then of course you mark every 5th stroke with a cross stroke like that, like 1, 2, 3, 4 cross. And then it's easy to count. Finally, when you've got all the tallying done, you count the tally marks and record in the frequency column for each class. And then, very important, you add the frequency column for a grand total to check to make sure that your tallying is correct. And you can take a look at page 144 and 145 for a more detailed example of what I was just saying. Or you can go back and listen again and follow along in those tables. The finished frequency chart you would see in example 1 as one of those. But if you could turn the page, we will go to try it number 1 and actually do a frequency table. So, as it states, the following list shows the grades for physical education of 36 students. And you see on page 146 a sampling of grades that were just gathered as it went along, and like a survey, every day they kept track of things, and this is the listing of grades that you see in that yellow box. So they want us to represent the data using a frequency table. So I would make my 3 columns. So first of all, I notice there's 36 students, so 36 grades, and the student grades would either be A, B, C, D, or F, so that's the class. And then as I go through that survey, or as they took the grades in random order, I would give a tally mark for every A, every B, every C, every D, and every F. Once I'm done tallying, then I count up the grand tally. So 5 and 4 is 9, 10, 11, 10, 11, 4, and 2. Okay, so there I go. And then I total them up, and I go ahead, and that's 22, 24, 28, 37. Oh, now see, this is why you do a total, 37, but there's 36 students. So I'm gonna go back again, and I'm just gonna double check what I got here and see if I did this correctly. So I'm just going to haul this out here so you can, so I'm looking at what you're looking at. So I go, and I'm just going to do the retallying right with this black pen now. So it goes 2 B's, 1 A, a C, another B, and a C, and an A, and a B, and an A. No, next row. A C, A, C, A, D, C, A, D, B, C, F, B, C, F, D, C, B, D, C, B, D, A, F, D, A, F, A, D, B, A, D, B, C, B, A, C, B, A, C, B, A, C, B, C, A, C, C, A, C, and B, C, B, B, C, B. Aha. That's where my extra 1 was. I didn't have that. I just had that. So I'm just going to change this to a 10 because everything else matches except that. And now I can go ahead and I will have my 36 because I found that extra 1 that didn't belong. So there you have it. It did take a couple times, and it's always good. That's now you see the purpose of having a grand total, because then you can see if you actually did the counting right. And I did it wrong. I had 1 extra C. So for a case like this, it doesn't, it doesn't seem to matter. But as we move along, you'll see why having an 11 instead of the correct number 10 could really impact how you would use that table in the future. Okay, in example 2, we have a different way of doing a frequency chart. In example 2, if you look at the solution at the bottom of 146, this part, instead of like grades A, B, C, D, they give an interval. And if you look up at the table, it's a bunch of decimals, and it's just random decimals. So this first column would be like way long, and then the tallies wouldn't make much sense when you would be looking at it to analyze. So what they did instead is they went, if you see in the solution table, 0 is less than x, which is less than and equal to 1. So between 0 and 1, and then between 1 and 2, and so on. So in that same vein, that's how Try It 2 is going to work, and they kind of give us a clue how to set up this frequency table. So moving across the page to 147, it says, the following list shows the prices in dollars of 24 books. So they just randomly took down prices. And then letter A says, represent the data in a frequency table with class intervals with 10 less than x is less than equal to 20, and then 20 is less than x is less than and equal to 30, and so on. So at this point, I know I'm going in groups of 10, starting with between 10 and 20. So it's not going to be 10, but it's going to go up to or less than 20. I look at my frequency table, and I notice my highest number, just quickly scanning, looks to be 47 in the second row. So that's why I have all these different categories. So not including 10, so between 10 and 20, equaling 20, and then, then starting with 21 up to 30, and then 31 up to 40, and 41 up to 50. Those are my intervals. Doing that, I go through that list of data and do my tally marks and mark one for whatever. This took me a couple times to do too, just so you know. This time I made sure I didn't make a mistake. I could show you up there because it wouldn't take so long. This would take forever, but you have to look at the data really, really carefully. Did my tally marks, and then counted the tally marks into the frequency column and totaled it. And yes, I have 24 books, which is what the information in Try It 2 says. So there we go. I have to tell you, and stop right now, this is very tedious work. It's long, it's particular. You have to pay attention to details like crazy. So to get it right, it looks pretty simple and straightforward, but sifting through all those numbers in those yellow boxes can kind of drive a person buggy, but hang with it and just take your time. It's just like take a breath and go for it. Okay, we have some more notes to take. Don't get freaked out. This again, you might have to pause as we go to get it all down. There are different types of data, and there's 4 types, which leads to a two-way frequency table. So first of all, the invariant data. Invariant data is data that consists of one variable, data that describes rather than shows a relationship. So the 2 tables that we just did would be invariant data. There's numerical data, which involves quantities that are countable or measurable, like heights, ages, distance, wages, points, things like that. Like grades like A, B, C, D. That's like a numerical data. Well, not grades. That gets into here. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Not grades, but anything that is assigned a number would be numerical data. Categorical data is data that's divided into categories like gender, age groups, test grades. Yeah, I misspoke before because ABCD is like categorical. And sometimes the categories are named with numbers, like 7th grade, age 20 and older. So there's a number involved, but it's really a category, not a definite number. Then you have bivariate data. And this is the one we're going to really be working with next. Data involving 2 different variables, which shows an association between the 2 variables. And the purpose of this is to analyze and explain the relationship between the 2. That leads us to setting up a two-way frequency table, which is a table used to summarize data on 2 categorical variables. So categorical variables, 2 of them, and to examine possible associations between the variables. Entries on the table can be absolute frequency counts, like tally counts, or relative frequencies, which is predictive, which means you would take the absolute and switch it into a decimal or percentage to predict what the future trend would be. So you start with the absolute so you can convert it to relative for predictive purposes. Okay, there you go. This is very helpful in science or determining trends of one sort or other. So, okay, here we go with two-way frequency tables. So, going right to Try It 3 at the bottom of 149, it says, Miss Sanders asked 26 6th grade and 25 8th grade students about their favorite kinds of movies. Action, which they substituted A, comedy, which is with the letter C, or romance, which is R. And the following list show the findings. So at the bottom of 149, you see the 6th grade results. So all the A's are for action, all the R's are for romance, and all the C's are for comedy. At the top of the next page, you see the same table only for the 8th grade students. So this is how you need to set up this table. You have the students, 6th grade, 8th grade, and then you have a total, and then you have the movie. So then the movie type is right here. So, which is action, comedy, romance. So first you go through and it says, here's a note. Before I made this table, I had to do this. And I didn't include that because I was running out of space. But you make two separate tally charts. First, you make one for 6th grade, and then you make one for 8th grade. And that's where you do the tally charts to see how many action, how many comedy, and how many romance. First for 6th grade and then for 8th grade. After that, you take those two frequency charts and combine it into the two-way chart that is produced here. So from those two separate charts, you're going to get this. So before I got here, I had to do one for 6th grade and one for 8th grade. I did not include that. It's really important. You're going to need to do that step, even though you don't see it here. So anyway, going on to A, 6th grade worked out like this: 10 for action, 10 for comedy, 5 for romance. So 6th grade totals is 25. I always do that to make sure I have 25 students because they each did. In 8th grade, I had 8 for action, 5 for comedy, and 12 for romance. That also totaled 25. So of course 25 and 25 totals 50. So hopefully this totals 50 too. So 8, 10 and 8 is 18, 15 and 17. That does work out to 50. So I did all my counting right because this grand total has to total 50 this way and 50 that way. So now I have my two-way frequency chart done. It took me a bunch of time because of the tally charts I had to do first, and then the double checking to make sure I had my numbers right. Now from that I can establish relationships, which is part B, which you find at the top of 150. Part B says find the percentage of students who like each kind of movie. So so that means I'm just going to take my total, because 18 out of 50 like action, 15 out of 50 like comedy, and 17 out of 50 like romance. And I just convert it to percentages. Excuse me. So 18 out of 50 times 100%, you can do that right on your calculator, is 36%. The comedy is 15 out of 50, which is 15 50ths times 100%, which is 30%. And then romance is 17 out of 50, 17 50ths times 100% is 34%. And then if I add my percentages, you should get 100%, and 36, 30, and 34 do add up to 100. So that's how you do B. Now they want in C the percentage of 6th graders who like each movie. So now I'm going to go 10 out of 25, 10 out of 25, which will be the same, and 5 out of 25. Excuse me. Here we go. It's all part C. So 10 out of 25 times 100 for the action is 40%. And the comedy is the same because it's the same fraction. And then romance is 5 out of 25, which is 20%, times 100% is 20%. Again, 40 and 40 and 20 make 100, so I'm good. I do the same thing with 8th grade. So I go to my two-way frequency. 8th grade is 8 out of 25, 5 out of 25, and 12 out of 25. So I, of course, write those like fractions. So action is 8 out of 25. 8 25ths times 100 is 32%. Comedy is 5 out of 25. 5 25ths times 100%. I did that up there. It's 20%. So I can just copy if I happen to remember that. Otherwise, plugging it into the calculator is no big deal. And then percentage of romance is 12 out of 25 times 100%, which is 48%. Okay, so that's D. I got all these percentages. E says compare the movie preference of 6th and 8th grade. So compare them. So remember, when you compare two things, you always subtract. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick little table here. So action, comedy, romance, and this time I need to record the percentages. So between 6th and 8th grade, action, and I switched this. I'll show you why I switched this down here before, but 6th graders like their percentage was higher than 8th grade, so it's 40 to 32%. So the difference between 40 and 32% is because I just subtracted. Comedy, it's 6th grade had 40, 8th grade had 20, so the difference between them is 20%. Now in romance, it's flipped. 8th grade liked more romance, so I put that first because it's easier to subtract. So 48 minus the 20% of 6th grade leaves me with 28%. I did this because in 6th graders like those two by that percentage, and 8th graders like romance by this much percent. So how do you write that? Therefore, you start with the percents. 8% and 20% of 6th graders like action and comedy more than 8th graders, respectively, because there's two of them involved. However, 28% of 8th graders like romance more than 6th graders. And that's how I would answer that question. Okay, there you go. And everything else that is highlighted is basically contained in the notes. All right, I am going to give you a heads up. Doing the assignment is going to be time consuming, but it is not hard. It's just keeping everything organized, going in a step-by-step thing, doing a frequency table that involves tally marks to sort out data is first on the list before you would change it into a two-way frequency table. So you got to go through all those steps. It's going to take a lot of paper and a lot of counting. So I will give you your assignment in class, but as always, rewind, rewatch, go over, ask questions if you need to, and as always, do good math.